1,000 soldiers marched into the desert, fully armed, fully trained, and absolutely certain of victory. They were not a weak force. This was one of the most powerful armies of its time, sent on a mission that was supposed to be simple, direct, and unstoppable. They carried weapons, supplies, and the confidence of an empire that believed nothing could stand in its way. There was no fear among them, no doubt, no hesitation. Just one objective: move forward and crush anything that resisted. The desert stretched endlessly before them, a vast ocean of sand under a burning sky. At first, everything went according to plan. The army moved in formation, disciplined, controlled, unstoppable. The sun was harsh, but they had prepared for it. They had water, they had maps, they had experience. This was not their first campaign, and certainly not their hardest. Or at least, that's what they believed. But the desert is not like any battlefield. There are no walls to hide behind, no cities to conquer, no enemy to face directly. Just silence, heat, and distance. And as the army pushed deeper into the sands, something began to change. At first, it was small. The wind began to shift. Nothing dramatic, nothing alarming, just a subtle change in the air. The kind of thing most soldiers would ignore. The kind of thing commanders wouldn't even mention. But in the desert, small changes don't stay small for long. The temperature rose higher, the air grew heavier, and the horizon started to blur. Soldiers began to notice it. The distant view that once seemed clear now looked distorted, almost unreal. The line between earth and sky faded, turning the world into something unfamiliar. But still, they marched. Orders were given. Formations held. The army moved forward because stopping was not an option. Hours passed. Then, more. The sun climbed higher, burning down without mercy. Water supplies were used more quickly than expected. Lips dried. Throats burned. Armor began to feel heavier, not because it had changed, but because the body beneath it was weakening. Still, no enemy, no resistance, no sign of battle. And yet, something felt wrong. The wind picked up again, stronger this time. Not just a breeze, but a force that pushed against the soldiers, carrying sand through the air, stinging their skin, scratching their eyes. Visibility dropped slightly, but not enough to stop the march. Not yet. Commanders shouted over the noise, trying to maintain control. Keep moving, stay together, do not break formation. But the desert doesn't follow orders. The sky began to change. What was once a clear, endless blue slowly turned darker, as if something was building in the distance. A line appeared on the horizon, faint at first, almost invisible, but it was there. And it was growing. Some soldiers pointed toward it. Others tried to ignore it. But deep down, everyone felt it. Something was coming. The wind grew louder. The air thickened with dust, and the line on the horizon turned into a wall, a massive wall of sand rising into the sky, moving toward them with terrifying speed. This was no ordinary storm. This was something else. Something far worse. Panic began to spread. Commands were shouted, but quickly lost in the noise of the wind. Soldiers tried to hold their ground, to stay in formation, to follow orders. But the closer the storm came, the more impossible that became. The light began to fade, not slowly, but suddenly. The sun disappeared behind the wall of sand, and the world turned dark in the middle of the day. Then it hit. The storm slammed into the army with unstoppable force. Winds screamed across the desert, carrying sand like a weapon. Visibility dropped to nothing. Soldiers couldn't see each other, couldn't hear commands, couldn't even breathe properly. The sand filled the air, the eyes, the mouth. Men fell to their knees, gasping, choking, blinded. Armor became a burden, weapons became useless. Strength didn't matter anymore. Nothing did. The formation collapsed, the army scattered, and in that chaos, survival became impossible. Some soldiers tried to run, others tried to stand their ground. But it didn't matter. The storm was everywhere. The sound of thousands of men replaced by the roar of the wind. The ground beneath them shifted, unstable, moving. Direction was gone, control was gone, and slowly, one by one, they disappeared into the storm. Not defeated, not killed in battle, but erased. As if they were never there. The storm didn't stop. It continued, hour after hour, swallowing everything in its path. The massive army, once organized, once powerful, was now lost, scattered across an endless desert with no way to regroup, no way to escape. And then, as suddenly as it began, it ended. When the storm finally passed, the desert returned to silence. The wind slowed, the air cleared, and the sun appeared again, as if nothing had happened. The same empty horizon, the same endless sand, calm, still, quiet. But the army was gone. No formations, no banners, no movement, just sand, stretching in every direction. Where thousands of soldiers once stood, there was nothing left. No clear tracks, no organized remains, no signs of survival. It was as if the desert had simply erased them. Hours later, small search groups began to move through the area. What they found made no sense. Scattered pieces of equipment, partially buried under sand. A broken weapon here, a shield there, fragments of armor barely visible beneath the surface. But no bodies in formation, no signs of a final stand, no evidence of a battle. Just silence. And emptiness. It didn't look like an army had been defeated. It looked like an army had vanished. Completely. The deeper they searched, the stranger it became. Some areas showed signs of struggle, faint marks in the sand, quickly disappearing as the wind continued to reshape the ground. Other areas had nothing at all, perfectly smooth, untouched, as if no one had ever been there. No clear direction, no survivors to tell the story, no answers, only questions. How does an army of 50,000 men disappear without a fight? How does something so massive leave behind so little? Some believed it was simply the storm, that the desert in all its power had overwhelmed them completely. The sand, the wind, the heat, all working together to break the army apart, to scatter them so far that regrouping became impossible. But others weren't convinced. Because storms like this don't usually erase everything. They destroy, they bury, they leave traces. But this felt different, almost deliberate. Some historians suggested that the army may have lost its way before the storm even hit. That poor navigation, combined with exhaustion and dehydration, had already weakened them. The storm, they said, was just the final blow. But even that explanation didn't fully make sense. Because even a lost army leaves behind a path. And here, there was none. Another theory pointed to something even more unsettling, that the army had been lured into the desert, led into a trap without realizing it, not by an enemy in battle, but by misinformation, by false guidance, by decisions that slowly pushed them deeper and deeper into a place where survival was never possible. A battlefield without an enemy, a war without a fight, a defeat without a single sword drawn. And then there were those who believed something else entirely, that the desert itself was the enemy. Unpredictable, unforgiving, alive in a way that no army could understand. A force that doesn't attack directly, but waits, watches, and then strikes when escape is no longer an option. Because in the desert, there are no second chances, no safe retreat, no clear path back, only forward. And sometimes, forward leads to nothing. What makes this story even more unsettling is not just the disappearance itself, but what came after. There was no recovery, no rescue, no rebuilding of that lost force. The army was never seen again, not regrouped, not reformed, not replaced. It simply ceased to exist, as if 50,000 soldiers had stepped into the desert and crossed into something beyond it. A place where numbers don't matter, where strength doesn't matter, where preparation means nothing. Only the environment decides who survives and who disappears. And in this case, no one did. The empire that sent them never got answers, no final report, no clear explanation. Just silence, a gap in history that was never filled. And over time, the story changed. From a military mission to a mystery, from a loss to a legend, a warning that even the most powerful forces in the world can be undone without a battle, without an enemy, without a chance. Because sometimes, the most dangerous thing isn't the army in front of you, it's the world around you. And on that day, in the middle of an endless desert, 50,000 soldiers learned that lesson. And then, they were gone.